All right. Are you ready? Welcome to the first ever episode of Real Estate Reactions, where me and my team member, Brady, over there, are going to look at articles in the news about real estate and react in real time to them because, real estate is kind of an interesting industry, right, Brady?
Especially now. I mean, a lot of stuff's changing.
Hmm.
Election's over now. Rates are still high. Like everyone's wondering when should they buy the next house or when are rates going to be back to 2%.
Right. So, if you don't know who the heck we are, my name's Tyler Miller. I run a real estate collective here in Minnesota. And this way is,
I'm Brady and I am on this collective with Tyler. And it's awesome. We grow every day and react to news articles sometimes. So
yep. And I will say Brady's in a much cooler place to record a video than I am, but we'll make do. All right. You ready for the first article? Let's
let's
get
do
into
it.
it. All right. First off, I just want to make sure. Can you see this?
Yes, I can, sir.
All right. So we're going to get to that one in a second. This one here, I wanted to get your opinion on. So obviously, we have a new president coming into office in January. With that has been a ton of, I guess, positive movement in the market, whether it's a stock market, interest rates we've seen come down a little bit. But ever since that, nomination came down, we are maybe moving in the quote unquote right direction in real estate. But I think this is something a lot of people have been waiting on. So it says Trump names Scott Turner the new HUD Secretary, so the Housing of Urban Development Secretary. So basically in charge of like housing in the United States. What I want to get your reaction on, Brady, is if you don't remember Scott Turner was in charge of, so during Trump's first administration, he was in charge of coming up with some creative ways to kind of reinvigorate some parts of cities that were just kind of like not being developed and just nobody really wanted to go in there and invest. And so he came up with opportunity zones, which was this awesome program that it was here in Minnesota as well, in Minneapolis in certain areas where it got investors some discounts and some great incentives to go in and start developing some of these forgotten parts of the city. And it was looked at as really successful at the time. And so just curious on your thoughts on, hey, this guy that had that program is now in charge of, the housing in the United States. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I know. I mean, for me, obviously a little bit younger and talk with a lot of my younger friends about housing just because I'm in real estate. And a lot of them just don't even think it's an opportunity for them
Mhm.
because it seems so far out and it's out of
Mhm.
reach. They don't know even where to start. So I think having somebody like Scott in the HUD secretary, like working every day to make that more affordable for younger people and first time home buyers. I know he brings up first time generational buyers as well,
Mhm.
and really giving them some more incentives to be able and make it a little bit more affordable. Is
Yeah,
something that's going to be a huge impact for people in my sphere, especially that just don't even seem like how home buying is a possibility anytime soon. Um,
right.
Somebody like Scott can kind of change that to make it a little bit easier for him, which is super exciting for me. So
Yeah. Yeah, I'm super excited to see what he comes up with. Again, I remember when that Opportunity Zone program got released, and I was like, "That's so smart!" Like, hey, these buildings that nobody wants to touch because they're just in a bad part of town. The business isn't there. It doesn't make any sense. Why would anybody go in and develop that? And he's just like, "Here you go. Here's why," and gave all these incentives. And I'm not smart enough to know exactly how where the incentives came from and all that type of stuff. And if overall if it's good or bad, I don't know. But I am excited for the potential of making homes a little more affordable. Because a lot of the things I heard during this election season was, we're going to give a certain amount of money to buyers to help make homes affordable, which you and I both know will not make homes more affordable because that's just going to be more money that they're going to then pay on the sale price of a home, making them potentially more expensive, and it's just going to raise sale prices. And so if in this article they referred to that there may be some opportunity zones created for new construction where the
Mhm.
builders are, we work with builders, we know how expensive it is to build a home. Think if there was some program where the builder could go and build a home for half the price because they're building in a underdeveloped area that needs housing. I mean, that's a game changer. All of a sudden, the houses are affordable for the home buyers, and we'll sell a lot more real estate. So I'm excited. We'll see what comes of it, but I thought that was a fun article. Any
No,
last comment?
I was just gonna say I totally agree. I think there's gonna be some really cool opportunities for some first-time home buyers here coming up in the next, 4 to 5 years. Um,
Yeah.
so stay tuned to see what he comes up with, I guess. So
Yep. All right. Let's look at another article. So I thought that this one was also I was kind of surprised by this one. And I think the reason I was surprised by that is so the article says basically that single family rent, so like the amount of what investors or landlords are charging in rent has dropped to a 4-year low. The growth rate has dropped to a 4-year low. The actual amount is still high, but it didn't grow as high as it has over the last 4 years. And so I was just kind of sitting here and I read the article. There's really not any explanation as to why. It was just kind of saying that there's statistics that show the growth is down. And I'm like, gosh, if we don't have enough reasons for people like not to buy a house already, let's throw this in the mix where it's like, hey, investors, you may not be able to, get as much or much increase on your rent as you were thinking. And so now I just feel like if this trend continues, maybe it gives investors a pause, where they're like, well, gosh, do I stick my money there or should I put it somewhere else? And so what are your thoughts on when you read this article?
no, I think it can be honestly a good thing for buyers. If we see these rent continue to drop in growth, like Tyler, you said, I mean, these bigger companies aren't going to want to put all their money into something that they're not seeing the growth that they did the last 4 years.
Hmm.
Maybe we can see more additional properties on the market that aren't just being bought out by these huge investor companies that a lot of first time home buyers have no opportunity to compete against.
Hmm.
And I know it's something BlackRock, everyone talks about that and how they're coming in and buying and can't let a first time home buyer even compete. Um,
I'm
with
gonna I'm gonna go off script really quick because I swear there's something like right here. I saw an article this morning and it was like um investors purchased like 23% of all home sales in 2024 or something like that. I don't have it right in front of me, but no, what you're saying is absolutely
like
correct.
that's like 24% is a huge number. And like if
Yeah.
you really think about it, like
One in every
I'm
four
going
home sales was an investor.
that's and I think that's going to start to slow down because of this rent growth drop in
Yeah.
growth, right? Which is going to be only a good thing. And you know, we talked earlier, and maybe we've hit a cap for rent. People are realizing I'm paying more to rent than I'm paying for a mortgage. I've helped
Hmm.
multiple clients this year, and they're like, I'm renting out this much. I'm saving them almost $300 a month by buying a home. Like
Yeah.
it maybe we've just hit a cap on
Yeah.
people starting to realize, wow, I just should buy a home.
Yeah. I agree. I think at some point enough is enough. And with inflation and then all this other stuff we've been dealing with over the past couple of years, I also could see renters just being like, yeah, I'm not going to pay that. Like I'll just go live at home again or. And so
Yeah,
investors are like, well, hold on, I won't raise the rent. I mean, I have a couple rental properties. I didn't raise the rent this year. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Because I feel like we were kind of getting like top dollar. It just didn't make sense to raise it. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, if the trend continues or if it's just kind of like this little blip because of the election or who the heck knows. Um, but yeah, interesting times with that for sure.
Yeah, I'll be super interested to see how that comes in, to effect, especially with, anything that Scott Turner comes up with, right? If there is
Right.
some, more affordable housing for these first-time home buyers to get, and they're like, okay, well, we have all these programs that Scott's creating,
Yep.
but my rent's way up here. Wait, why don't I just explore the option at least? And I think
Right.
it's something we're going to see a lot more here in the next few years. So
Well, let's talk about our last article. This one I saw, I think it was last like Friday or something, the 21st. It was recent. It got released. So basically what it talks about in this article is there was a release of these projections for how many sales we were going to have across the nation in 2025, and they were pretty like positive. And then this article is just pointing out that they've now revised some of those where it says dramatic downward revision. It's like they always try to make something so scary. They're still predicting more home sales in 2025 than in 2024. They're just not as high and mighty about it. So there's a graph here, right here, that shows 2024, there was 704,000 new homes and 4 million existing homes. They're predicting 4.1 million existing homes and 50,000 more home sales. So I mean, there's still more, right? And so I think that somebody might see this headline and be like, oh boy, market's gonna be bad.
here comes
Um,
the crash, right?
yeah, no, and it actually addresses some of that in here, but the overall reasoning for this subdued downward revision or whatever, the subdued home sale projections is interest rates. Plain and simple. It's interest rates, right? Because, and it talks about it, and we've been talking about it since 2022, that hey, people are kind of locked into their house. Like, for example, this house that I'm in right now, there's a 2.25% rate on it on a 15-year mortgage. And yay for me. Um, maybe it's because I listen to professional realtors in my life. Um, but like, I get it. On the surface, people are like, well, I can't. I'm not going to sell. The rates are 7%. I got to go buy a house and my payment's going to double, for like the same price. I get it on the surface. It makes tons of sense. And so that's why we've seen such a reduction in home sales over the last handful of years. Is it just like clearly it's not, the math ain't mathin' for a lot of people, as the youngins say. It ain't mathin'. And so we talked about a solution for that, but before we get into that, what is your 2 cents on just the article in general when you read it?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much going on in real estate for rates to kind of stay where they're at after the election. There's so much going on, and I know rates actually kind of bounced back good after we heard Scott Turner was getting into that
Mhm.
HUD secretary position, which is great for us. But I
Mhm.
mean, overall, right? You have such a low rate on your home now that you feel quote unquote trapped, just like a lot of other people. And I actually had a client that felt very similar, but there was this beautiful house and they wanted to buy it. So we looked into some more finances, right? And it's like, okay, yeah, you have this much you're making from the sale of your property. You're putting X amount down. You have, let's call it 50 grand left over, right? And it's like, okay, well, they asked, well, should we buy down the rate? And I'm like, well, what else do you have? What else are you paying per month? And they're like,
Mhm.
well, we have they have a 4x4, right? And they're paying, 400 or 500 bucks almost a month, like, which is a lot. And it's like, well, how much do you have left? And they're like, oh, we got like 20 grand. I'm like, well, let's use that to just pay that off because you're going to save a lot more by paying that 4x4 off than buying down your rate 20 grand. Like
Yeah.
it makes more sense. And it was something that really opened their eyes. And they're like, okay, yeah, that does actually save me almost more money. Yeah, I'm getting a higher interest rate, but my monthly expenses are actually a little bit even.
Yeah. And do you have that graph handy?
The equity.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
So
home equity is actually at an all-time high from this article I was reading. Let's see, I'm just trying to move this
I
little
can
phone.
see it. I can see it perfect.
Okay, perfect. So as you can see, like as you mentioned, Tyler, you're like, well, housing prices or sales are not going to be as high as we once predicted. The crash is here, it's happening. But the biggest difference between the housing crisis back in '08, '07, '09 is the homeowner equity compared to the home mortgage debt. Yeah, we're at an all-time high in home mortgage debt. 13.2 trillion is the highest it's ever been in US history. And that's probably what the media is going to talk about. And they're
Mhm.
never going to bring up this homeowner equity side of things where we have
Well, that's
35
not the
homes a
positive
month,
isn't sexy, man. Positive's not sexy. They got to talk about the negative because then they get
right?
clicked.
Exactly, exactly. So yeah, we do have the highest amount, but we have almost triple the amount in homeowner equity. Back in '08, '07, we had more debt than equity. Now we're complete opposite of that, right? We have
Yeah.
way less debt than we have in equity. So at the end of the day, if somebody's not going to be able to afford their mortgage, they can probably sell their house and have plenty of cash left over.
Well, and really quick, I think you misspoke. You said something like the crash is here. There's obviously not a crash. I think you're saying
Exactly.
that you're saying the subdued home sale, meaning we're in a more stable market where we're not going to see, as many sales as we did in COVID. And there's definitely, people have to think before they just buy or sell a house. Like, so I want to make that clear. I think Brady
There's
misspoke.
not a
Yeah.
crash. I
And
think
that
people are
graph
missing.
explains why there's not going to be a crash. And I've been saying this since I got into the industry, essentially, of like people are like, well, when do you think the next bubble is? And I'm like, the problem is for anybody waiting for a crash is that graph. That graph shows that anybody that does get behind on their payments, right? Home insurance is going up, taxes are going up. My taxes just increased 21% on my house. It's insane. Commercial property taxes are increasing by 50% right now. Um, if people get behind, right, they're like, I can't afford that. They have equity. They're not just going to foreclose on it. They're not just going to dump it. They're just going to sell it. I don't know where they're going to go. They'll figure that part out. That's a whole different conversation, but they're not going to just foreclose on it. And that's where the crash was, is people were foreclosing and now home prices all came down because the banks took them over and sold them for cheap. And so like that graphics, and first off, I'll also say I don't think we're ever going to not have record setting numbers on either of those, because as home prices rise and people are taking out mortgages, the debt number will rise because home prices are more expensive, and so
Yep.
we're going to have more debt, but I think we're also going to continue to have more equity. And so I think we're in a really good spot, and that brings me to the last point that Brady and I want to make, and Brady kind of touched on it earlier, but on our team we call it a lifestyle interest rate. And I think when people are like, you as a homeowner that's watching this or listening to this, if you are thinking I could never move because rates need to come down to 2 to 3%, if that is the only thing that will get you to move, you won't be moving. I want to make that very clear. You won't. You're not going to move. Like, that's your house for life. We're not going to probably see 2% rates ever again. It was a pandemic. It was overall a very scary time. Of course, rates were low because nobody wanted to do anything. They had to incentivize the whole country, the whole world to spend money because nobody wanted to spend money. So unless there's something crazy that probably will make you not want to move anyways, like a pandemic, there's not going to be 2% rates again. So it's like, well, how do we get out of that mindset? And the best way to think about it is, more than likely, because there's studies that show we have the highest credit card debt by, I think, billions or trillions of dollars than we've ever had in the country right now. We have inflation at very high numbers. More than likely, you have a debt. You have a debt other than a house. Like, you have something you're making monthly payments on. And if you have equity in your home and you're like, I got a 2% rate, but you're drowning, like you're up to your nose in payments. Well, what the hell good does a 2% rate do? Like, who cares about that? So we strive on our team here to talk about like you guys, you could take the equity, go buy a house. Yep, your payments might be more. That's probably a fact. But then with a leftover money that you don't need to put down, you can go pay off all the other stuff that makes such a more significant impact on your life.
Mhm.
But what are the stats that I tell you, or that you know when you run numbers for people? $50 a month equates to how much money down?
About 10 grand.
Yeah. And if you guys are watching and you got a car payment for 10 grand, like that's left on it, and your car payment's more than $50, it's probably
Sure.
300, 400, 500. If you're D money, we won't talk about how much your car payment is. If you could take 10,000 and pay off your car and all of a sudden you save $500, that's like putting, what would that be, $100,000 down on a house? I mean, honestly, that's what it equates to. And so that's my message for anybody is when they're seeing these things about rates staying kind of high, but they might be coming down, or it's never going to be 2 and 3%. So like just know that there is a solution to get you out of your house and into another place and pay off lots of debts because of the chart that Brady found with all the equity that's going on.
There's a lot of it.
So with that, that was our first real estate reactions. I think we kept it somewhat short, so that's great. And we're going to do this weekly with some new articles to kind of keep you guys in the loop as to kind of what's happening, whether it's related to the consumer or there might be some articles related to the real estate world that we want to react to. There was kind of like a lawsuit that happened like back in August that a lot of people had a reaction to. So we're looking forward to having some more timely, just current event information for you guys, and appreciate you watching. Brady, last thoughts?
It's a changing market. Got to stay on top of things. And if you guys want to have the most up to date information, reach out to me or Tyler, and we'll get it for you guys. And make sure the process for buying a house is smooth and easy.
On the RER, the real estate reactions.
Boom.
Boom. All right. Have a good day, guys. See ya.
Yeah.